Copyright in these lectures is either owned by the ANU or a third party who has licensed the ANU to use it. Students may use the recording for personal study only. No lecture may be communicated online, copied or shared without the prior permission of the ANU.
Okay, so let's make a start. So the stuff if you've been watching while you wait, there's a couple of things I'm doing up here that I have to do on this computer, which means I had to wait until I could get into the room to do them, and they take a little bit of time. So we're just waiting for R to catch up. I'll tell you what I was doing in a minute. In the meantime, what's our plan today? So our plan is we're going to start talking about doing graphics in R, which is kind of the point of using R in this course. So last week we did a little bit of a quick introduction to R. Again, I hope you're using Swirl at home. I know at least somebody is, because I got an email with an error message which I couldn't fix, but luckily the person themselves fixed, which is terrific. Sometimes on your computer things don't work as they work on my computer. This is the nature of Windows, right? The world we live in. So my best advice is if you're trying to install something in R, because quite often you're going to need to install a package, and that's, for example, something that you have to do with Swirl. So, you saw me do it last week. Install.packages Swirl, library Swirl, it all works. Your machine at home, install.packages Swirl, then hideous error message when you try to load it. Now, so this happened to somebody. They emailed me, they sent me the error message. A couple of things about that. So I'm very willing to try to help, but there's not a whole lot I can do unless I'm looking at your machine, right? Because there's something about your machine that's different, that stops it working on your machine that doesn't stop it working on mine. So I did what I ended up telling this other person to do, which is, what you do is you take the error message, copy, put quotes around it, paste it into Google, and guess what? There'll be somebody else on this planet who's had the same problem. Okay? And that'll generally send you to one of two places. It'll either be Stack Overflow or Reddit, and you then basically have to sift through the different solutions that people have attempted. There ain't no other way, unfortunately. It's just part of the world we live in, that everybody's computer is screwed up in different ways. And, it could have to do with a driver, or it could have to do, in some cases, for example, if your language on your computer is not set to English, it gives you all sorts of problems, okay? So my best advice is, and this is not to tell you not to email me, because I'm very happy for you to copy and paste the error message into an email to me, but that's generally going to result in a wait at least until 4 a.m. the next morning, right, when I read your email. In the meantime, if you've got nothing to do, just again, copy and paste the error message into Google. Someone else will have had your problem, and then sift through the solutions, okay, and see how you go. Google is your friend, right? it's a weird world we now live in, because back when I was your age, this is one of a lot of my stories start with back when I was your age. So back when I was your age, it would have been, I don't know, 1980 something low, 1981, 1982, whatever. We had computers, but we didn't have Google back then. So if you didn't know something, you were screwed, because you couldn't ask anybody, and if it was not good. These days, anything you want to know, you just ask Google, right? And Google knows. Now, Google sometimes tells you a pack of lies. That's the fake news part of Google and all that. But in some sense, knowledge is somehow now readily available. So we've kind of replaced needing to know stuff with needing to know how to Google, and it's the way the world has gone. Anyway, Google knows a lot about R, which is cool. I'm just waiting for... this thing is just sitting here, so I don't know what it's doing. Anyway. All right. So we're going to talk about graphics in R. Now, I tried to show you last week, but was unable because the web was so slow in here. It's not today, which is good. The R graph gallery. So again, this is a web page that assembles all sorts of different examples of graphics in R. I've taken it to the scatter plot page and just scrolled down to an example here. I want to say a couple of things about this. A lot of the graphics that you see that are done in R now are done using a package called ggplot2. Now, ggplot2 is a package that was written by this New Zealand guy, Hadley Wickham. And it's both really, really good and sometimes not so good. It lets you do some things really brilliantly, but in my opinion, it produces ugly graphics. Okay? Why do I say that? Well, first of all, Hadley loves pastel colours, apparently, because just about every graphic that ggplot produces is in pastel colours. You know, the sort of washed out pinks, the washed out blues, the washed out greens, things like this. The other thing that ggplot2 does by default is it puts this stupid grid in the background, this grey grid. You can see the grey grid there. Let me kill the board lights so you can see it. Lights, board lights. Oh, there we go, it's probably better. And I just don't like the grey grid. I mean, there's no need for it, okay? And these are defaults in ggplot2. Now, you can coerce ggplot2 not to honour its defaults, but if you're doing that, you might as well just use base graphics in R, because base graphics in R are capable of doing all of the graphics that ggplot2 can do, okay? So, now this is a choice, it's up to you. If you want to learn ggplot2, go for it. But I'm not going to do it in this course, because I don't like it, frankly. And I think that it produces ugly graphics in a lot of cases, okay? So if you came here to learn ggplot2, disappointment, all right? But look, again, if you're dedicated to learning ggplot2, guess what? Google. You'll learn everything you need to know. There are full online tutorials about it. We are going to use what's called base graphics. So base graphics are the graphics that are built into R. They are capable of producing simple, very effective graphics, and that's what we're going to focus on. ggplot2 also has no support for anything 3D at the moment, and hasn't done since it was written. I don't think it ever will. And we are occasionally going to use some 3D stuff. If you're looking in the R graph gallery, you might see a graphic that you want to replicate, right? So here I've got a scatter plot that's got a confidence interval pushed on top of it. All you do is you just click on the graphic. You can see I've got the little hand with the finger, this guy. And if you click on that, then a new pane opens. You get the graphic again, but underneath it is the gold, which is how they did that in R, right? So quite often you'll be sitting thinking, I really want to produce a graphic that looks like this. And guess what? If you can see the graphic on their page, you can see the R that produced it, which means you can replicate it. Okay? So this is a really good page. 2 years ago, this page didn't exist. So people doing this course would often ask me questions like, how do I produce this graphic? And I could tell them how. Now, again, you can find out for yourself. You can produce really, really complex graphics very quickly. Now, treat this the way you treat a gun. Okay? Assume that it's loaded and don't point it at your head. All right? because just because you see a graphic and you think it looks cool does not mean that it's an effective graphic, right? Looking cool and being effective are different things. Now you know this, right? Lady Gaga. Looks cool, not so effective, right? No one dresses in neat. It just doesn't, it smells, I mean, it's just, anyway. So you'll be able to see how to do all sorts of god-awful things by looking at this page, or one of these pages. Do not be seduced by availability, right? That's the premise on which Aldi works, okay? I go into Aldi on a Saturday and I walk out with a chainsaw. I did not need a chainsaw, and I'm very likely to cut my head off with it, right? But there it was in the centre aisle, right next to the pumpkins and the strawberries. And I'm like, my God, I've never seen a chainsaw so cheap. I must buy this. So I buy it, whatever, right? You go, oh, you wouldn't buy a chainsaw. No, but I might buy an electric guitar, which is right next to the chainsaw, right? This is Aldi. This is the Aldi of R-graph graphics, right? You think, I want to produce something really odd looking. This tells you how to do it. Just because you can doesn't mean you should, okay? So please use with caution. Treat it like a loaded gun. But you will learn a lot as you load the gun. Just don't shoot it at yourself, all right? Very important. So that's the R-graph gallery. It's a really useful page, but again, be careful. All right, now I'm hoping that in the background R has done something. It has done something. Oh, what's it done? No package knit-R was found. Oh my God, I wonder if it'll let me load this. It might not. So what I'm doing is I'm just loading some packages that I'm going to need to show you some things. Unfortunately, I have to do it at this machine, which means I have to be in here to do it. So I'm just going to load the next one, and hopefully it won't take too long. So I apologise for you having to watch me do this. These are packages which do some specific kinds of 3D graphics that I want to show you today. So I'm just hoping that I'll be able to do this. Okay. So the two packages are RGL and APL pack. Okay? Anyway, we'll come back to them in a minute. All right, now there is a data set. This is the data set that goes with Chapter 1 of the notes. Okay. Someone pointed this out to me in an email on the weekend as well. In the notes it talks about two variables, evap.y and evap.x, which is the name of the data set. Let me tell you what the data set is. It's about evaporation, and it's about temperature, humidity and wind speed. Okay? Soil temperature, air temperature, humidity and wind speed. So the idea is this: when it gets hotter, water evaporates, okay? It's the process by which we keep the planet relatively wet. Didn't work for Mars, works for Earth. So this data set's based on this. Now in the original version, evap.y was the evaporation column, that first column you see here, and evap.x were 3 measurements of soil temperature, called max, min and mean, 3 measurements of air temperature called max, min and mean, and humidity and wind speed. Now, I don't know what happened. Well, I kind of do know what happened. One of the first things that the notes tell you to do is to join these two data sets together into a single matrix using cbind. So you see cbind evap.y, evap.x. And I have done this, but I've accidentally overwritten what was in evap.x in the class data. So evap.x already has that y column attached. Now, why am I telling you about my mistake? Well, I don't want you coming into this class with any illusion that I'm perfect, right? We'll leave that for my family to believe. But you don't need to believe that I'm perfect. So I make mistakes. So that's cool. We all make mistakes. Okay. This mistake matters because an object, evap.x, that I had in the class data has been overwritten with a new object called evap.x that has this extra column at the front. Now I could take that extra column off and pretend I didn't make a mistake, But there's a lesson in here that's really important to know. R is an object-oriented language. So every variable you create is an object, okay? If you overwrite an object with one of the same name, it does that. And it replaces that original object in your directory with that new object. And that old object is gone, okay? So it is possible to make mistakes like this. Now, how do you prevent yourself making these mistakes? Answer, you can't. You will make mistakes. So, my advice is pretty simple. Whenever you write R code, try not to write it just in, so this is the RStudio environment. See, it's got an extra pane at the moment. It's got a script pane, that's top left. Then it's got the commands pane. This is where I could just type commands in that bottom left one. Then top right, I've got the environment, which is all my objects. And then bottom right, I've got a bunch of different possibilities. Plots appears in here, so this is where your pictures are going to appear. Help appears in here, and so on. So we've looked at help the other day. We're going to look at plots today. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and write all my R commands up here in this script editor. Now, writing them up here does not run them, okay? All it does is it just keeps track of my commands. So this is a way for you to keep track of your commands within RStudio. Otherwise, you might have to write them in a Word document, right, and copy and paste across. This keeps it all in RStudio, and you can save your scripts. So when you first come into the room, this script thing is maybe not here, right? So I'm going to get rid of it here. Okay, this is what you see. So how do you get it? You go under the File menu, you go New File, RScript. Okay, so you're going to want to be doing this, and that window suddenly appears. And then I had a bunch of commands that are in the lecture computing section on Waddle for chapter 1. So I opened that in text editor, I copied it, and when I paste that into here, all those commands appear in here now, and now they're ready to go. You can just type in here as well. Okay? Now, you'll see the first command I had was Z is cbind evap.y and evap.x. If I select that and I click on Run, watch the bottom pane. Watch the bottom pane. It appears there and runs it. Okay? Now, I don't even have to select it. Now, by doing that, by the way, I've now got that first column twice, right? Because I've just attached that first column to something that already had the first column attached. So I don't actually want to do that. So what I'm going to do, just in the window below here, I'm going to go Z equals evap.x, because that's what I actually needed. All right, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start showing you some different plots. So we'll start with a simple scatter plot. Now I'm a bit space challenged here on the screen, so I'm going to have to make the things different sizes. This is something you probably have to do on your computer too. I know most people here have laptops, so tiny screens. So you're going to be getting used to dragging these edges around so that you can make each bit the size you want. Okay. I was dragged into actually JB Hi-Fi on the weekend, and I saw the most amazing screen. It was a Samsung screen. It was about, I don't know, it went from about here to over here, right? And it was curved, right? And it was almost, and so obviously it was for a gamer because it had some big game console attached to it. So this is so if you had that and you were using RStudio, you would be in some kind of heaven, right? So I go to JB Hi-Fi. It's only a few $1,000, right? But my God, it's large, and so you wouldn't have to shift windows around. But if you're doing this on your laptop, you'll be shifting windows around. Okay, so just beware. By the way, you can make this as big as you can. Sometimes you have to do that, and it just hides the other pane. You can always drag it back down. Okay, this is called a scatter plot. This is a really simple representation of two-dimensional data. Okay, you've all seen scatter plots before, so nothing here is going to surprise you. But I'm going to tell you something about the R interface. Okay, you'll notice this is an ugly graphic. because there are some things about it that don't really help me. So for example, the x-axis is called Z4. Now you don't know what Z4 is. You know it's the fourth column of Z, but what the hell's Z, right? Or Z, depending on what language you're speaking. We know that on the y-axis is plotted Z2. Ugh, what the hell's that? The rest of it looks okay, but not, you know, you can see a relationship here. So one of the things that but there's no title, right? So I don't know what this graphic is about. So generally, when you produce a graphic, you want to do a lot better than this. This is your basic scatter plot. So I'm just going to show you how to tidy this up. I'm just going to go back to that previous command. So I'm just using the arrow keys to get around. Okay. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to improve this graphic just by doing three really simple things. Okay. So the first simple thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put a label on that x-axis. Now I've got to work out what Z2 and Z4 are. So Z4 is, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's mean soil temperature. Okay. Z2 is max soil temperature. No, because I remember I took off that bogus first column. Yeah. So in other words, I undid my other error. Yeah. So xlab equals mean soil temp. Okay. Xlab, xlabel, right? Ylab equals, what was it? It was max, wasn't it? Max soil temp. Putting spaces in here. Okay. Then I'm going to go main equals, quotes, soil temperatures or temps. Okay. Now, you might say, well, it's hardly changed. Of course, the picture hasn't changed, but now there's labels everywhere. Okay? So, here's my lesson, right? Everybody knows when you go to the toilet, when you're done, you wash your hands, right? You know that. And you know that if you don't, you're bad, right? And you'll probably infect everybody with bad stuff, okay? We all know that, right? And nobody thinks about it. You go to the loo and then you wash your hands. Everyone does, right? Yeah? Yeah, and you don't think it's habit. Okay. When you don't label a graph, xlab, ylab, title, you're bad. You're bad. And other people will suffer. You go, how can they suffer? They'll look at your graph and they'll go, what the is that? Right? Notice how I left out a word there? What the hell is that? Okay? If anybody looks at a graphic that you produced and the first words out of their mouth are what the, you've produced a bad graphic. Because, the idea is communication, right? I give you this graph so you understand something. If the first words out of their mouth are what the, guess what? You failed. Okay? So, always put a label here. Always put a label here. Always put a title on the top. Now, when I mark assignments, if there ain't labels on everything, I know you don't wash your hands when you go to the toilet. And I'm going to think things about you, you won't like them. Okay? And there'll be punishment, like lower marks, right? So, because right? I mean, for most of us, washing the hands, you do it because you don't know how many times your mum told you to or your dad told you to, and then when you didn't, you got in trouble, right? And eventually you figured, it just ain't worth the hassle. I'm just going to wash my hands. You didn't understand why, because when you're 3 years old, you don't understand why. Okay? But now you do it because, same with this. Now, I know I'm labouring the point. You're going, why is he talking about toilets? Well, the answer is, if you get nothing else out of this course, apart from good graphics hygiene, I've done you the biggest favour on God's green earth. And the reason for that is, if you look professional, if you do things that look nice, that are easy to understand, you will make a good impression. And making a good impression is 90% of the battle in communication. It seriously is. Okay? People trust you if it's neat. People trust you if it looks good. It's part of the way communication works. And it's really important to know that. So, start practicing good hygiene now. And remember, if you don't, there's trouble, and so on and so forth. Okay? Now, this is a classic example of do as I say, don't do as I do, because you'll see many of the graphics that I'm showing. I'm just trying to show you how to do stuff. I won't necessarily label everything. You go, why? You aren't washing your hands. This isn't good. And the answer is, do you really want to watch me type a whole heap of crap every time? Answer is probably not. So, but I'll try. I'll try. Okay. Now, this is great. I've got now one soil temperature versus another soil temperature. Okay. What's that show me? Linear? Linear relationship. Yep, so we can all see that. Now, isn't this interesting? This is the way humans work again. There's a pattern there. There's a straight line that goes through there. Everyone sees a straight line? Yeah? Yeah? There's no line on the actual plot, so it's your imagination that you see the straight line. Let's put a straight line in there, just for fun. So I'm going to go AB line, LM, Z, comma 2, tilde, Z, comma 4, dollars, cove. So there's a straight line through that plot. Okay? Now, here's what we just learned. That first graphic is an example of what's called a high-level graphic. Okay? So it puts something new on the page. Okay? Then AB line is a function that doesn't put something new on the page, it adds to a graph that's already there. Now, if you couldn't see the straight line through this relationship before, you sure as hell can now, because it's actually there. Why would you do that? Well, you do that because you can't assume that everyone sees what you see. Okay? Because people might not know what to look for. I mean, you've sat in stats classes long enough to know that if there's a bunch of points that sort of follow a straight line's the natural thing to go there. But if you're a Joe Public, why? Why does it matter, right? So you can add things to graphics to help people see what you want them to see. Right? This is, again, Communication 101. Show people if you want them to see it. Don't just assume they'll see what you see. Okay? There are lots of good examples of how that works. For example, let's see. How do I get to my documents? There we go. So I'll show you a picture now, if I can get it to come up. Hello. Uh-oh. Oh, open. Just open. Oh, just open. Oh, for... Okay. Why is it offering me these options? Okay, just do that. Okay. Whatever. Okay, there's a picture. What do you see? What is it? I know what it is. I see it. Anyone know what it is? Animal, vegetable or mineral? Animal is the answer. What animal? Cow. Cow. Well done. You see the cow? You just guessed cow? What the? That's impressive. That is truly impressive. Give that man a high distinction. No, not really. Sorry. No high distinctions for cows, sadly. Okay, it's a cow. It's a cow's head, by the way. Now that I'm up really close to it, I can't see it anymore. But I can see it in the one up the back. So let me show you. This is his nose. This is his nose down here. That's one eye here. The other eye's in shadow. These are his ears. Okay. You can see that. People go, I still can't see it. Okay, this has been cropped out of a bigger picture. Let me show you the bigger picture. Hopefully it'll just open this one. Who sees the cow now? There's a cow there. Everyone see the cow? No? What the? Tail, legs, I don't have to tell you what those are. Head. Right? See the cow now? Yeah? So what's been cropped out is his head part. Okay? By the way, once you see it, you can't not see it. But before you see it, you're sitting there going, I just can't see it. Right? And what do? It's an example of an emergent form. It's what's called an emergent form in visualisation theory. Okay? It's a picture of a cow. And you're going, why is he showing us that? Well, for some people, when they look at this scatter plot, they don't see a straight line, they just see a bunch of dots, right? So this is really interesting. A few years ago, there was a guy who sat up the front in this class every day, and he had a 4-year-old child. Didn't bring him to class, had him at home. And I said to the class, I said, you know, the ability to see patterns in things doesn't start when you're born, it comes later. So we actually took one of these scatter plots home. He had a couple of kids, a little young one and one who was 7 and one who was 10. And he gave them the scatter plot and he said, you know, draw Daddy what you see here. And the youngest just scribbled on the page. I don't see anything. It's like, it's a paper, I've got a crayon, that's fun, right? Scribbled all over the page. The next youngest one was about 4 years old, joined the dots. Literally joined the dots. Because there's no concept of pattern there. You see dots, you've got a crayon, what are you going to do? Join the dots. It's only when you got to the 7-year-old where they actually drew a line through it, right? Now, look, again, you're probably thinking, are these lectures all going to be like this? Probably. But here's the thing, right? We're getting to the nub of what statistics is actually all about. Statistics is about taking masses of data, usually very noisy, and reducing it down to some generally pretty simple signal. And you've been doing this in statistics since pretty much the first day you've been in a statistics class. You just didn't know it, right? So when you spend your first year in statistics learning about X bar, the mean, and S, the standard deviation, what you don't know is you're on a journey from having lots of data from which you get very little information automatically to a very small number of pieces of information which somehow tell you everything. And this is enshrined within statistical theory. It's the theory of sufficiency. So, I'm going to take you back to when you were in first year, right? You remember you learned about normal distributions? Yeah? And we calculated X bar and we calculated S. And then what we didn't tell you was that for a normal distribution, X bar and S are what are called sufficient statistics, which means that once you know those two numbers, you know everything. Now, what's this about? This is about a journey from going from tons of information without much structure down to a very small amount of information that actually captures all of the relevant structure. If I give you 10 million data points from a normal distribution, that would be overwhelming to most people, right? It's just numbers everywhere. You don't know what's going on. If I give you the mean and the standard deviation, just two numbers, right, and I tell you it was from a normal distribution, you can draw me the distribution, okay? So statistics is all about what I call compression, taking large amounts of information and compressing it into the useful bits. And graphics do this too, okay? So when you first look at this scatter plot, you've got, what, 30-odd, I think it's 47 data points in there. It's 47 pieces of information. That line is a very simple object. It's a one-dimensional piece of information, okay? And it tells you basically everything you need to know. When I ask you what shape is that, most people say it's a straight line. It is not a straight line, by the way. It's a bunch of points, right? The straight line is your fiction that goes through it. The thing is, that fiction represents reality well enough for us to say something meaningful about the way these two variables relate. And that's the power of statistics, right? If I say to you the value of X is 150, what's the value of y going to be? If you know the line, you're going to put the value of y here on the line. And you can tell me that. And all you need to know is the equation of the line. If you don't know there's a line there and I say x is 150, what's y? You don't have an answer because you just don't know. Okay? And so statistics is all about taking scads of information and trying to say, what's the important bit and how does that help me understand the processes that underlie this data? And scatter plots are the first way to do that. All right, taking a long time to talk about little things, but you know what? That's important because from little things, big things grow. I think your mum probably told you that as well. And now you're big, so that's cool. Here we've got data that is actually high dimensional, right? This thing has 10 columns, maybe 11 if I counted right, I don't know. Nobody here can visualise 11-dimensional data. I don't care how smart you are, you just can't, right? You probably max out at three-dimensional data. So here we've got 2 dimensions, okay? That's not a very good look at this data. What if I want to look at all the dimensions all at once? Well, I can't really do that, but what I can do is I can look at the obvious directions all at once, and I'm going to produce what's called a scatter plot matrix. That's only for 3 of them. I'll show you the full one in a second. So this is looking at all of the soil temperature variables, max, min and mean, and it's showing you each one of those relationships. So if I want to know what's the relationship between max and min, I look at this plot here. Right? It's got max on its left, it's got min underneath. Now that's the mirror of this plot here. Okay? This one here is max versus mean, because it's got max to its left and mean underneath. And this is min versus mean. This is called a scatter plot matrix. It's an example of what are called small multiples, which we talked about the other day. And it's an example of how you can look at a bunch of relationships in high-dimensional data all at once. Okay? And the best analogue I can give you for this is to say if you go to a new city and you want to know what it's like, you can look down individual streets, but you're not going to get a sense of the city. This is letting you look down multiple streets all at once. Okay? So it's like having a map. Now this data set had 11, I think it had 11 columns. Let's find out. Dim of Z is 46 10 columns. If I want to look at all 10 columns, one against the other, I can do pairs of Z. And I get this picture. Now, here's the problem, you know. Humans aren't as smart as we think we are, really. So I'm looking here at 10 times 9 divided by 2, 45 different things, 45 different relationships, okay? It's kind of hard, isn't it? Yeah, it's kind of hard. Humans, yeah, here's the thing. We've got 5 fingers on each hand, right? If you're lucky, 5 fingers on each hand. So humans can cope with about 5 things. We max out then, right? There's something in there somewhere, 5 things. If you see 5 people standing over in a group, if it's up to 5, you can usually say, oh, there's 5 people there, or there's 4 people there. You can identify the number pretty quickly. If you get above 7, you just say there's a bunch of people over there. Now someone says how many, you go, a bunch, right? If it goes above 5, your ability to visualise it and get that into your mouth so you can say the number it's harder, right? So we max out at about 5. This is 45 things, and of course it doubles over the middle, so there's 90 things. So you get overwhelmed. And so if I said to you, this is a picture of the 11-dimensional data set, you go, that's terrific, but I don't get most of it. So you've kind of got to part it out and look at it in sections. So for example, here are the soil temperatures, these 3 here, and so you can look at those and you can sort of see all of these are sort of straight lines, okay, and so on. So you can look at it in small chunks, but that's about as well as you can do. Now, 2D allows you to do these 2 things, look at things 2 at a time, or this scatter plot matrix, which lets you look at lots of 2D relationships all at once. What I'm going to show you now is some very limited 3D things. So APLPack is a library that contains some 3D commands. So I've just loaded that library. and then hopefully, what the hell? Something bad happened. Let's try this again. Okay, so this is a command that lives inside APLPack, which is a package. It's called plot3d. I'm just going to look at the three dimensions Z2 to Z4. So the command is plot3d Z2 to 4. You'll notice Windows is telling me something. It's telling me there's a window hiding. There it is. Okay, I can make this bigger if I think I can make it really big. There we go. And you go, oh, that's cool. It looks just like the other ones. But oh, that's cool. Thank you. When I was your age, someone showed me stuff like this in a lecture once. It blew my mind, right? Because back in 1980, you just couldn't do stuff like that. These days, I'm surprised people were going, oh, because, you know, there's all this CGI and stuff going on in the world. But this is pretty cool. I can now look at this data in 3D, and I can rotate it into any direction I want. And you get a real sense for the shape of this thing in 3D now. So what does this look like? Looks like, oh, we can be nice about it. It looks a bit like a cigar. Looks like a cylinder, probably, you know. And you can do this for any set of three of the variables, right? So I can close that window. And I can look at, I might decide, well, I want to do that thing, but I want to look at Z2. I'm going to look at Z, 2, 5 and 8, say. 2, 5 and 8. So I go Z, comma, C, 2, 5, 8. Right, that'll show me, should be one air, one soil and humidity or something. Anyway, it doesn't matter what it is. And you can see that relationship is not quite as straightforward. One thing you will see very interesting is if you rotate it into certain orientations, you can see that humidity is measured at discrete values. See how they all line up? Whereas you can orient it into other directions where that structure is hidden. Okay? And so in 3D, and this shows you the limits of looking at stuff in fewer dimensions than it actually exists, right? So this is 3D data. My screen's 2D, nothing I can do about that. When I was your age, we were promised that by the time it was 2000, probably year 2000, they said it would happen. Nothing happened. You go into lectures and your lecturer would have some little hologram machine for data, and you'd walk into the hologram and there'd be data all around you and you'd be doing this and all that sort of. We were also promised that robots would do all the work. None of this came true. I'm still doing all the work and we're still in 2D. My God, how long is it going to take? At least for the robots, because I really need the robots to come and do some of my work. But anyway, but this is as good as we got. And look, it's pretty good, but it's still relatively limited. By the way, a scatter plot matrix is you orienting this into three particular directions and showing those, projecting it, right? This gives you the illusion that you're in 3D. So it is pretty cool. It is pretty cool. All right. So that's APLPack. There are alternatives to APLPack. RGL has similar commands. It's called scatterplot3d, same sort of thing. I'm not going to show you that because some machines have trouble loading RGL for some reason. And this is the thing with R, right? R is written to work on most machines, but some packages work better than others. I find APLPack to be very reliable, RGL less so. But it's basically the same kind of picture. Okay. All right, so that's plot3D. So in RGL it's called scatter3D. Okay, a couple more things to show you, and they're back here. So this is just funny. Let me just do this. Boom. So these are called Chernoff faces. Right, so Hermann Chernoff was a statistician who worked at Stanford, he worked at Harvard, really great statistician, published lots of stuff, really famous. This is what he's most famous for, and only because it's so damn funny, right? So here's this, it's a brilliant idea that just doesn't quite work, okay? When you're a baby, when you're first born, what do you look at a lot? You look at faces. Facial recognition seems to be built into humans, right? So, for example, if I draw a circle, well, you have to follow my finger. If I draw a circle and a thing like that, and dot, dot, what have I drawn? Smile, right? Smiley face. No, this is not the digital version, which is colon brackets. No. It's a real smiley face. Circle, smile, eyes. Okay? Everyone says it's a smile. My question to you is, where's the nose? Everyone has a nose, right? Why don't we draw the nose? And again, this is another example of good enough because I've compressed a lot of it. So faces are quite complex, right? Most faces are not symmetric. We'll talk about symmetry another day. But most faces have a nose, 2 ears, a mouth, eyes. But when you draw a smiley face, you don't draw the ears, you don't draw the nose, you don't draw the eyebrows. There's all sorts of stuff you don't draw. So you've got a model for a face that is quite deficient in looking like an actual face, but gives you enough of a representation of something. What are we communicating when we draw a smiley face? Someone's happy, right? And if I turn that smile upside down, they are sad. And did their nose change? No. Did it need to change? No. So we didn't draw the nose, so it doesn't matter, right? But you've heard the expression of smiling with your eyes, but we still draw 2 dots. Okay, so, it doesn't capture enough. This is the nature of statistical modelling as well, right? When I drew a straight line through that scatter plot, I missed almost every dot, right? But people were still buying that was the relationship. When I draw a smiley face with a curve and 2 dots, that looks like nobody's face on this planet, right? Or if it does, man, that's a bad plastic surgery job, right? But everyone identifies with it. So Chernoff's idea was really simple. Chernoff's idea was facial recognition is built in. What if we align features of the data with facial recognition? What do we get? And that's what he did. So you'll see in the R pane here, these are the variables. Height of the face is the maximum soil temperature. Width of the face is the minimum soil temperature. So if you've got a face that's tall but narrow, right, that's someone who's got a high max soil temperature and a low min soil temperature, and so on, okay? And so you'll see there's all kinds of different facial features that map to certain variables. Now, you'll notice, because I only use 3 variables in this, there's lots of mappings going on. I'm going to be more ambitious. I'm just going to map the whole lot, all 10 columns. So if I go faces of Z, I get that, looks a bit different. So the height of the face is evaporation, the width of the face is max soil, structure of face, min soil, height of mouth, width of mouth, smiling, height of eyes, width of eyes, height of hair, width of hair, etc. Okay, I start to repeat because I run out. Okay, and so every face represents all 10 dimensions of the data. What I should be able to do from this is be able to tell relationships between variables. Here's the problem. We all know what faces mean, but that meaning is locked, right? A smile means happy. It doesn't mean that a variable is big or small, right? So there's still this gap between what we're meant to interpret and what we see. And that locking of what you think faces mean is an absolute impediment to you using these things properly, okay? Now, you might say, well, this makes them useless. It doesn't really. I have seen, this is a true story. There's a scientist at ANU, a guy by the name of, I think his name's David Lindenmayer, pretty famous, you see him in the Canberra Times sometimes. He discovered a new species of possum using Chernoff faces. He went and gathered data on, I don't know, hundreds of possums, and he had lots of different measurements on them. Apparently if you hold the possum down and you get out a ruler, you can measure just about anything. You get bitten, but you measure lots of stuff. And he had all these measurements on possums. And so he did a Chernoff faces map on all of these variables he collected on possums. So you had a big table of these, 100 on a page. One face looked different. And it looked really different to all the others, new species of possum. So there are uses to these sorts of things, okay? But for the most part, it's funny, right? And we get that. Okay, stars as an alternative, so let me show you that. This is an attempt to try and codify in a 2D plot a much smaller number of variables. Okay, so here we've got three things. We've got, it's actually not the outer part, the triangle, it's actually the inner part, the skeleton, that measures the variables. So you've got one variable, second variable, third variable measured on these. And you'll see that these variables are all moving together, right? So most of the triangles look roughly equilateral, right? And when they're small, they're all small. And when they're big, they're all big. So that kind of tells you that when minimum soil